Hi, I'm Malika Bilal, filling in for Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, learning about the Holocaust from those who lived it. We'll hear from Jewish survivors of World War II's genocide. With me is digital producer Omar Badar, and he's looking out for all of your live feedback online. What is the conversation looking like so far?
You know, it's kind of hard to reflect on the Holocaust without being just a little horrified at what our species is really capable of, and that sentiment is being echoed online. You have Toby here who says, the Holocaust is a perceptual reminder of just how brutal human beings can become. Of course, we want to know if there are any more practical lessons that we could have learned from the Holocaust. For those of you at home, you can tweet us using the hashtag AJStream, and we'll get to those tweets during the show.
Now with us on set is Margit Meissner, a Holocaust survivor originally from Austria. She shared her experience in the memoir Margit's Story. Margit, welcome to the stream.
Thank you.
During World War II, Nazi Germany ordered the persecution of millions of European Jews and others, including Roma, gays, and people with disabilities, who were labeled a threat to the so-called German race. An estimated 6 million European Jews were killed in what became known as the Holocaust, which lasted from 1933 to 1945. Many fled, but those who couldn't escape the Nazis were sent to death camps and endured forced labor, human experimentation, or death by gas chamber. These mass atrocities helped establish genocide as an international crime after the end of World War II. So today we want to examine the events of the Holocaust, and 70 years later, does the world have any better sense of how to prevent genocide? With us to talk about this is Ava Moses Kaur, via Skype, a survivor who founded the Candles Holocaust Museum and Education Center in Terre Haute, Indiana. She also works to collect the history of twins used as human test subjects by the Nazis. In Washington, D.C., Peter Fredlake, Director of Teacher Education at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, and via Skype in Wisconsin, Jennifer Lowenstein, a faculty associate in Middle East Studies at the University of Wisconsin. Welcome to you all. Now, I want to start on my laptop with this image, and this is an image of a family, and Margit, this is your family. You moved several different places when you were a child in your teen years to escape rising anti-Semitism. Can you tell us what that was like?
Well, as you know, I was born in Austria, but I was raised in Czechoslovakia. And those are my brothers and my parents on the picture, and they all, fortunately, all survived, but they had a hard time finding asylum in the world, so we became very much distributed across the world. So one of my brothers lived in Spain, another became a Canadian, a third one became an Australian, and I became an American. And for many, many years we didn't see each other. Yeah. But when the Nazis invaded Austria, my mother thought I wasn't safe in Prague, so she sent me to Paris thinking that I would be safe there. And then I welcomed the Nazis when they came to France.
Welcomed them. So a day before the actual invasion, you were there, but you escaped.
Well, the day before the Nazis actually entered Paris, I fled by buying a bicycle because I was all by myself. My mother was imprisoned in a French camp, and I had no idea what I should do, and people were streaming out of the city in a most chaotic way. And then I thought, I can't just walk, so I bought the last bicycle I could buy in Paris, and then I left by bicycle, of course tremendously afraid whether I was doing the right thing.
Right.
Excuse me. I had no idea where my mother was, and I just followed the crowd.
How old were you?
I was 18 at that point.
18, and you eventually reunited with your mother,
yeah,
right?
Miraculously. I found my mother miraculously, but the escape was not over.
Right, and this is your mother Lily here, right, in the photo.
Yes.
Where are you here? You're this young one right there.
I'm the little morose girl who didn't seem to be very happy when the picture was taken. And the woman on the right was my governess.
Did you have an idea of what was happening, why you were running, what was going on?
Absolutely no idea. You must remember that in the 1930s there were no media. The only thing we had was newspapers and some handouts, sort of publications, anti-Semitic throwaway leaflets. So we really didn't know.
Right. Well, Eva, I want to bring you in here because you have a story that's really just as harrowing. And I pulled up on my screen a picture here. And this is a picture of two twins. This is you and your sister, Miriam, at 12 months old, I believe. And you were among 1,500 sets of twin children who were used in genetic experiments under the direction of a German officer and doctor known as Joseph Mengele at Auschwitz. Can you tell us about that experience?
We were not really informed about anything that would happen to us, but I was used in two types of experiments. One day or 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we would be placed naked in a room. It was an observation lab for 8 hours, and they would measure practically every part of my body, compare it to my twin sister, and compare it to charts. That was not dangerous, but unbelievably demeaning.
Of course.
On Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, we would be taken to another lab that I call the blood lab. And there they would take a lot of blood from one arm and give me a minimum of 5 injections into the other arm. The content of those injections were germs, diseases, and drugs, and they were very dangerous. And after one of those injections, I became very ill, which time I was taken to the hospital, which looked like a barrack filled with living dead. Mengele came in next day and looked at my fever chart. He never examined me and declared, laughing sarcastically, "Too bad. She's so young. She has only 2 weeks to live."
Eva, we have somebody here online who is asking a question about people who go through these kinds of experiences. Jeff asks, are they in any way tormented by the horrors of the past, either in their dreams or subconscious mind? Eva, what is it like for you right now? When you think back about it, can you separate your emotions from it, or is it still a very emotionally charged memory for you?
I am doing very well. I am completely healed from Auschwitz. I have forgiven the Nazis 20 years ago, and that healed me emotionally. I can talk about it. I remember all the details, but I no longer have any nightmares. And I very strongly would like to recommend to my fellow survivors to try it. The forgiveness is not for the perpetrator. It's for every victim to realize that they do have power over their life after the tragedy ended. Not to hold on to the pain, but to forgive and reclaim their own powers.
Margaret, you heard her talk about reclaiming your narrative. You started writing your memoir at a very advanced age, correct?
I started when I was 80.
Right. What made you decide now is the time I want to tell my story?
My children kept bugging me that they would never, they were afraid I was going to die and they would never find out the history of the story. But I agree with Eva completely that one cannot hold a grudge and one has to be able to forgive, not to forget. And this is one of the reasons why I work at the Holocaust Museum as a guide, because I think that if we were fortunate to survive, we have a responsibility to tell the young people especially what this was all about so that it would not happen again.
Right. Well, Pete, I want to bring you in here because you heard Margaret say there the responsibility to forgive but not to forget. And that's a slogan we've heard many times over and over, not to forget, we shall remember, never again. Those are things we hear, but of course, as Margaret mentioned, being at the Holocaust Museum, you often see examples of this happening again. You hear examples of mass killings in Rwanda, Srebrenica in Bosnia. You hear about other places. What is that common thread there then that you try to explain to people when you teach about the Holocaust so that this doesn't happen again?
Well, I think one of our big challenges is to take the narrative that people walk into our museum with, and that doesn't always coincide with the historical record. Many people walk in thinking of the Holocaust in a very simple way, that it was perpetrated by people who were not like us, and it was perpetrated on people who are not like us, and it happened a long time ago, and it was sad, and it's too bad, but it's in the past. This is it's a very safe narrative for people. They can hold it at arm's length. They don't need to think about it. And what we want to do is try to turn that and to have the Holocaust really act as a mirror, so that people start reflecting a little bit more on their own responsibilities as individuals, their responsibility to their community, to society. And so this is always our challenge. How do we flip the narrative that people walk in with by showing them the historical record, by showing them the evidence of this unprecedented crime?
So, Jennifer, I want to bring you into this conversation as well. We have other people in our online community who are also raising the skepticism about the slogan of never again. We have April on Facebook who says, never again, that's a joke. It's a platitude that is uttered for the sake of applause. Governments only care about genocide when it affects their interests. We've had 2 major genocides in the last 40 years in Cambodia and Rwanda. What did the U.S. do about them? Jennifer, do you think never again is more than just a slogan?
Well, I think it's more than just a slogan. I think the problem is that we don't really follow it, do we? I mean, we have had far more than 2 genocides since the Nazi Holocaust. We've had many Holocausts, and if you look the word up in a dictionary, it is, the first meaning is the mass slaughter or destruction of a group of any group of people. We can count hundreds of Holocausts in that regard. That is not said to disclaim or discredit any of the horrible stories that I've heard, that I know about firsthand or have read about. I do nevertheless think one of the problems with Holocaust remembrance is that, first of all, it limits people to remembering one Holocaust, the Nazi Holocaust. And 2, it doesn't focus enough on prevention of Holocausts that may be happening around us today, or that we have simply lost down a memory hole that we don't consider Holocausts, such as what happened in Vietnam or in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. There have been many, many terrible, terrible mass destructions of people, people targeted and dehumanized systematically, allowing a society to stand by and watch. And we know about the Nazi Holocaust, most of us, in the West at least, and this is important. We have to nevertheless move ahead. We are not victims. We cannot act like victims. I agree with Eva very much about that. But we have to acknowledge the humanity of all of the people who are victims of these kinds of crimes.
When I lecture to large groups, to young people, to anybody, I have 3 life lessons. Life lesson number 1, never ever give up on yourself and on your dreams. I tell young people that growing up is very hard. I did not know how to survive Auschwitz, but by not giving up, here I am 70 years later. Second, the way we treat people who are different from us. We have to learn to treat everybody with respect and judge them on the content of their character. And number 3, forgive your worst enemy. Forgive everybody who has ever hurt you. It will heal you inside and set you free, and it will empower you to feel that you have some control over your life. Because victims, the first thing they lose is control over their life. And I want to compliment Margit. You're just the third Holocaust survivor that I heard of who is wise enough to understand the power of forgiveness, that we cannot change what happened, but we can send a message to all victims that they have power over their lives now. Of course, I never forgotten what happened. You can't. It changed my life.
Well, Margaret, you heard what Eva saying there.
That my life now.
Right, and you hear what she's saying there. It's changed her life, and so there's a message here for younger generations. Those are some of the generations that you talk to in your work every day. What do they tell you? Do they understand the history?
Well, they may not understand the history, and I don't know that it is really that important that they have to understand the history. I think what they have to understand is their responsibility, because I believe that every person has power over what he or she does. And the motto of the museum is what you do matters. And I am trying to tell young people that it's their responsibility to be aware of what goes on in the world around them. They may not be able to change the politics of their country, but if they see prejudice and bullying and violence in their own community, they should not say, well, it's none of my business. It's everybody's business to make sure that people understand that everybody has to be treated equally and with respect, and that they have a role to play. They can't just walk away from it. That's why I am a guide in the museum and a speaker in the museum,
right,
because I think that's the message for the coming generation. And the Holocaust is past. You cannot undo what happens, but you certainly can make sure that you understand your own responsibility in this respect.
Just to stay on the educational front of this, Pete, we have somebody here, Debo, who tweeted in saying that though the event is documented, the victims should continue to recount their experiences for the next generation and for future generations. From your perspective, how important is this, that it's not only taught as a historical event, but that there's still that human element of it being recounted as stories to people, so it resonates with them more than just an event that happened once in the past?
Well, I agree, and thank you for the tweet. I think one of the things that we have always tried to focus on at the Holocaust Museum is to get away from the abstraction of the Holocaust. Numbers like 6 million, 11 million. These are abstractions that people just can't get their heads around. But if you're able to meet a survivor like Eva, like Margit, and talk to them and realize that, as a 16-year-old kid coming to the Holocaust Museum, I'm speaking to somebody who went through these events as a 16-year-old. That human element is absolutely essential. I taught high school English for 30 years, and in those years when we were able to bring a Holocaust survivor into the classroom, it changed everything. All of a sudden, it went from being something that you looked at in a history book or on a videotape, and now it was something that these students now had a personal connection that made it real to them. And when I hear from my students from 10, 20, 30 years ago, the thing that they remember about the class often is meeting a survivor face to face.
Jennifer, I want to shift gears just a little bit and push this on to an interesting critique that I've seen online, and that is the use of the Holocaust for political gain by various political leaders. I want to read you a quote here. This is from the Huffington Post, and this is from a professor at Tel Aviv University, Carlos Stringer. He writes, "Unfortunately, some of our politicians make irresponsible comparisons between the Nazi period and the present. Not only do they not serve Israel's interest in doing so, but they're also abusing the Holocaust and the memory of its victims. Is this something, Jennifer, that you've seen, and what are your thoughts on this perspective?
There's a lot I can say about that. I want to go back just for a minute and respectfully disagree with Margot and say that I think understanding the history of any Holocaust is very important, because we begin to see patterns arise, including the systematic dehumanization of a people, and that these patterns have to be understood by people who are studying history and by people who are looking around them to try to understand why something is happening in the present. I do agree, by the way, that what we do matters. I think it is equally important for us to say to people that if you do nothing, you are complicit in allowing these kinds of actions to continue. Now, just directly to answer your question, I think the Nazi Holocaust has been very badly abused by many people, not simply the government of Israel, but certainly by the United States. It is constantly invoked as an excuse to bomb other nations for, in my view, often very crass political goals, or supposedly national security goals. And this is highly irresponsible and, yes, a terrible disservice to the survivors of the Holocaust who went through a kind of personal suffering that nobody can possibly understand unless they have gone through it, or as Mr. Fred Lake said, have met a person face to face who can express or convey the experiences they lived through, whether in the Nazi Holocaust or, as I said before, during the fallout of Hiroshima,
right,
or napalm in Vietnam.
Peter,
these are very important.
Yep, Peter, I want to throw this to you, but I want you to hear a video comment from one of our guests, from somebody in our community, real quick. Take a listen to Matan.
The Holocaust is being politicized by different actors for different goals. For example, a number of right-wing Israeli politicians repeatedly depict the enemies of Israel as Nazis. Simultaneously, others claim that what Israel is today doing to the Palestinians is the same as, or even worse than, what the Nazis did to the Jews. This accusation, which is common in contemporary anti-Semitic discourse, is often made in a way that trivializes the Holocaust and collectively demonizes Jews around the world, depicting them as the Nazis of today.
We're running a bit low on time, but if you can give me a short answer, would you agree that comparisons to the Holocaust, whether by Israeli politicians or by enemies of Israel, is equally inappropriate on all fronts?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to our emphasis on the historical record, and this is how we approach teaching about the Holocaust, not by using comparisons that are often, the comparisons are sometimes naive. They're sometimes uninformed. Oftentimes they're meant to incite, and I don't think that serves any educational purpose. We've been working very hard at the museum to reach our audiences where they are. We have historical content that's available on our website in 15 languages, including Arabic and Farsi, Chinese, Spanish, Turkish.
And Pete, of course, as you're talking, I pulled your website up actually on my screen here.
Right.
And we'll talk about this more in the post-show. The page that I'm actually on right now is a resource for families in the diaspora to find their missing family members from the Holocaust. So we'll get into that on the post-show. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this conversation, but I have just enough time to tell you about the next show. Why did 30 Ethiopian writers and reporters flee their home in the past year? We'll find out. Stay with us, though. The post-show is next at stream.aljazeera.com. We'll see you online. Welcome back. This is the Stream's online post show. We're talking about the legacy of the World War II Holocaust 70 years on. Let's get right back to the conversation with Pete. Pete, I was showing the website of the Holocaust Memorial Museum and used as a resource for people to find their missing family members. How does this go across, and how do you teach this to younger generations around the world, and how is it received?
Well, I can give you a couple of examples. Just in the last couple of years, we've been doing a considerable amount of work in Turkey. We've been partnering with the Anne Frank House out of Amsterdam to train teachers in Turkey in several different cities about the importance of teaching people about the Holocaust. And I can't tell you how well received we've been. People are they come in with a particular understanding of the Holocaust, and they realize that the story is much more complex than what they had realized, and they're hungry for more information. And it's one reason that we've gone to this translation so much, because we want people who are interested in it and who want more information about the Holocaust to read about it in their own language.
Yep. Eva, I want to go to you with a question. You were talking a little bit earlier about the whole idea of forgiveness, and we have somebody here in our online community who's struggling a little bit with it. We have Curious, who says, the Nazis are history, so who do you forgive now? Regular Germans today have nothing to do with the Holocaust. The word that you're talking about should be forget, but then goes on to say the Holocaust can never be forgotten, so forgiveness does not come into it at all. Eva, can you elaborate just a little bit more on what forgiveness actually means to you?
I would ask this person if every survivor deserves to be free of what was imposed on us. And the answer, of course, is yes. Since I cannot change what happened, no one can change it. I discovered that by forgiving the Nazis, I remove the burden they have imposed on me, and I also call forgiveness the best revenge, because what they have done to me no longer makes me a person that is incapable of being happy and continuing my life with the knowledge of what happened, but not imposing the pain and burden and sadness and anger that so many of the survivors. I just came back from Auschwitz from the 70th anniversary of the liberation of the camp. I was together with 300 survivors. Every single one of them are still paralyzed by anger. They cannot enjoy life. And that's a tragedy.
I commend that.
As do I, but go ahead, explain why.
I
Why?
think that...
Because
Well, Jennifer said that she commends that, so I'd love her to elaborate on that.
I think Eva is correct. I think that when we allow circumstances to control us and to continue to oppress us for decades, for generations, we are prolonging our own victimization, and we can't really claim to be personally free of what happened to us. Now, whether there is a such thing of ever fully freeing ourselves from those experiences is something I suppose a psychiatrist could answer better than I could. But I think the aim of letting go of those crippling memories and the experiences that build anger in us for decades, if we don't let go of them, we are controlled by them. And I think we behave towards other people in a way that shows it. And in a way that in many ways, I'm sorry, one last thing, in some ways perpetuates it. And I think we can see that today in modern Israel.
Eva, you wanted to say something?
I don't agree with you. First of all, I disagree with you that Mother Israel has anything to do with perpetuating the burden that was imposed on them. I think the Israelis are challenged on a daily basis with their survival. That is the biggest problem. And therefore
I completely disagree.
You have not lived in Israel. I have.
I have lived in Israel.
At least 3 of our guests today have lived in Israel, and I know that, of course, is a contentious issue that you brought up, Eva, and of course there are residents, civil society organizations, NGOs, and even those in the international community that would disagree with that point that you raised, Eva. But I want to steer this back to our conversation today, and a point that you brought up about forgiveness setting you free. I think it could be controversial to those of us listening that may not have a direct connection to this. I want to bring in Margaret on this, though, because of course you're also a survivor. That idea of forgiving, it sounds easier. It has to be easier said than done.
Well, to come back to your original question, you said there is no more forgiving the Holocaust. You have to look at the situation today, so that you cannot forgive anybody at this point. I mean, there are terrorists who attack various people because of their nationality, because of their ethnicity. I think that since they do not affect you personally, there is no such thing as forgiving. But you have to try and understand why they are doing what they are doing. And many of them live under circumstances which tend to be very difficult for them. So I think one thing that one can really look at is how one can improve their situations. Because usually rich people do not murder other people. I mean, they commit other crimes, like money crimes.
Right.
But the people who do the murdering and who do really the terrorism, by and large, and one should not generalize, are not the people who really live under dire conditions. And I think that's what one should focus on.
Omar.
Yep. So, Pete, I want to throw this to you. Whenever you have any kind of discussion on any online forum, there's no doubt there's always going to be people out there who just say stuff that is completely out of left field, including many Holocaust deniers. So we have Magdalena here who commented on one such comment section saying, I'm saddened by many comments here. I am Polish and the Holocaust cost my nation 6 million citizens, an additional 3 million killed by Soviets. Denying historical truth leads nowhere. I'm just curious, from your perspective, do you just dismiss people you come across who deny the Holocaust as just people not to bother with it all? Or does it actually get to you and bother you on an emotional level?
Well, I think, on an emotional level, it certainly bothers me, but we're very careful not to engage with Holocaust survivors at that level. Holocaust deniers have, political or ideological or personal agendas behind why they're doing what they're doing, but Holocaust denial has no place in a historical debate at all. There's no serious historian who even engages in that kind of thing. So again, we feel that we can fight against Holocaust denial, which is often a form of anti-Semitism, with the historical record, with educating about the Holocaust by using the wealth of evidence that exists about the Holocaust, rather than getting into a emotional debate with somebody who's got an ideological reason for having the debate.
Can I say something?
Jennifer?
Yeah, something about this bothers me a great deal. Personally, I think that many people who claim to deny the Holocaust are very, very angry people who look around them and who see their own people suffering terribly and ask themselves again and again why their suffering has not gotten the publicity and the decades of media coverage that the Nazi Holocaust has. Whether or not we're talking about something 70 years ago, and I'm sorry to bring in this explosive topic, but what happened in the Gaza Strip last summer in which 3 of my very close friends were killed, who had nothing whatsoever to do with Hamas or fighting. These people are people who will tell me personally they know there was a Holocaust, but they ask me, does our suffering is our suffering minimized by this? Does our suffering not count? Are we did we bring about the Nazi Holocaust? We are paying for the Nazi Holocaust with our land rather than Germany. Why didn't Germany offer the Jews of the world a homeland within its own borders?
Well, Jennifer, I'm going to pause you there because you were leading us to a completely different show topic, but I appreciate your thoughts and our condolences for your friends that passed. Our condolences for, of course, our guests on today's show who lost members in the Holocaust as well. I'm going to pause this conversation because that's all the time we have, but if you want more information, you can check out this page, which is on my screen here. This is rememberme.ushmm.org. That's the Holocaust Memorial Museum. And before I thank our guests, any last words from the community, Omar?
We have a closing tweet here from Abel who says, "It is up to the victims and their families to forgive, but it is up to the rest of us to learn from history and never repeat its mistakes."
I like that forgiveness is the theme, and not forgetting is also the theme of this show. I want to thank all of our guests, Margit Meissner, Eva Kor, Peter Fredlake, and Jennifer Lowenstein. Now, on the next show, we'll examine why Ethiopian writers and reporters are leaving their country. That's for next time. Thanks for watching.